Let me read for you a quote from Harry Anslinger, who was America's first drug czar. A direct quote from the man who was in charge of the policy. "Marijuana influences Negroes to look at white people in the eye, step on white men's shadows, and look at white women twice." Okay, this is the statement that I promised I was going to read to you, and it's about the criminalization of cannabis and a little bit of the history of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it here. A lot of people don't have any idea whatsoever of the history of this thing. Quite possibly the most remarkable public statement I have seen from a law enforcement official on the cannabis issue was made on July 31st by Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance, whose father was Secretary of State back in the 1970s. He stated, quote, "Tomorrow our office will exit a system wherein smoking a joint can ruin your job, your college application, or your immigration status, but our advocacy will continue. I urge New York lawmakers to legalize and regulate marijuana once and for all. The needless criminalization of pot smoking frustrates this core mission, so we are removing ourselves from the equation. Our research has found virtually no public safety rationale for the ongoing arrest and prosecution of marijuana smoking, and no moral justification for the intolerable racial disparities that underlie enforcement." End of quote. The prohibition of cannabis was ill-conceived, discriminatory in its enforcement, horrifically expensive, and immeasurably more destructive to our national culture than casual use could possibly have been. It is way past the time when it should have been ended on a national level. It is appropriate to acknowledge all those who have advocated for decriminalization during the most repressive times, and to thank them for their efforts and sacrifice. My position and sentiments have always been aligned with theirs, though my primary value as a doctor of chiropractic would have been compromised by too public an advocacy. This has been the position forced upon many other professional and public figures, and is a clear and continuous violation of all of our First Amendment rights. I have been and will remain a committed advocate for the completion of this long process of cannabis decriminalization on a federal level. I also advocate the immediate release of all nonviolent offenders and a redirection of the funds now used for incarceration to a program of reintegration into society. While I oppose the criminalization of cannabis users, I also oppose the open commercial promotion of this or any other substance that has the potential to disrupt routine and sober mental functions. I support the right of anyone who might use cannabis for medical or recreational purposes, and I am confident that they will access cannabis without the aid of advertising and promotion. The history of alcohol and tobacco should guide us in that regard. I've compiled a brief list of resources for you to consult. What you will discover is an outrageous and embarrassing story of racism, bigotry, and unfair business practices that have been so blatant and audacious as to render them unrecognizable for what they are. They are admittedly supportive, the documentation I'm going to provide you, of ending cannabis prohibition, but you have throughout your lives been inundated with oppositional materials that have promoted and perpetuated the current policy agenda. You will also be exposed to the ecological, medical, agricultural, industrial, and economic values of the non-psychoactive strain of cannabis known as industrial hemp. In many ways, that is a more compelling story than the story of marijuana, and has the potential to move you toward decriminalization with greater urgency. Now, this is going to be posted on the website for you to look at. There's books here, there's articles here, there's things you can go and visit on YouTube. Let me read for you a quote from Harry Anslinger, who was America's first drug czar. A direct quote from the man who was in charge of the policy. "Marijuana influences Negroes to look at white people in the eye, step on white men's shadows, and look at white women twice." Another quote from him. "There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others." what kind of language is that for somebody who's setting government policy? And this was a historical foundation of marijuana prohibition. Now, let's move forward. I got one last thing for you here. This is from John Ehrlichman, Nixon's chief of domestic affairs. You might remember him from the Watergate hearings. And this is what he had to say. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Now, I've heard people say that he was just being cynical and sarcastic, but isn't it strange that the very things that he was saying are what has been the result of the policies that were initiated in 1970 under the Nixon administration? So, go to the website, check out these references, learn a little bit about the history of this stuff because it's coming up. You know, there's going to be more and more discussion on this. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon.